Have you ever experienced a moment where the universe seemed to be speaking directly to you? A recurring dream that haunts your sleep, a symbol that appears everywhere you look, or a feeling so profound it stops you in your tracks? What if I told you these aren't mere coincidences, but meaningful messages from something far greater than ourselves? Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary psychologists of the 20th century, spent his entire life exploring the mysterious territory between psychology and spirituality. He believed that the human psyche is connected to something transcendent, something he called the collective unconscious, and that this connection allows divine wisdom to flow into our everyday lives through signs, symbols, and synchronicities. Today, we're going to explore the profound signs that Jung believed indicate God, the self, or the divine is trying to communicate with you. Whether you're religious, spiritual, or simply curious about the deeper patterns of existence, what you're about to discover might forever change how you see the world around you. Sign 1. Recurring dreams with powerful symbolism. Jung was deeply fascinated by dreams, calling them the royal road to the unconscious. Unlike Freud, who saw dreams primarily as wish fulfillment, Jung believed dreams were messages from the deepest parts of ourselves, and often from something beyond ourselves. When you have the same dream repeatedly, or when certain symbols keep appearing in your dreams night after night, Jung would say this is not random. The psyche is trying desperately to get your attention. The divine is speaking through the language of symbols, because the conscious mind often cannot hear direct messages. Pay attention to dreams about water, which Jung associated with the unconscious itself. Dreams of vast oceans, floods, or peaceful lakes often indicate deep emotional or spiritual transformation brewing beneath the surface of your awareness. Water dreams frequently appear when you're on the verge of a major psychological or spiritual breakthrough. Dreams of being chased might represent shadow aspects of yourself that you're running from, parts of your personality or truth that you need to integrate. When God or the self is trying to guide you toward wholeness, these dreams intensify because spiritual growth requires facing what we've hidden from ourselves. Flying dreams often emerge during periods of spiritual expansion. Jung saw these as the psyche's way of showing you that you're ready to transcend your current limitations and rise to a higher level of consciousness. The divine might be telling you it's time to trust yourself and take a leap of faith. If you dream repeatedly of a wise old man or woman, pay very close attention. Jung called these figures the archetypes of wisdom. They represent the self, that God image within you, trying to offer guidance. What do these figures tell you? What do they show you? Their messages are often the most direct communication you'll receive from the divine realm of your psyche. Sign 2. Meaningful coincidences and synchronicity. Perhaps Jung's most famous contribution to understanding how the divine speaks to us is his concept of synchronicity. This isn't just about coincidences. It's about meaningful coincidences that feel almost impossible to explain by chance alone. Jung defined synchronicity as the simultaneous occurrence of two meaningfully but not causally connected events. In simpler terms, it's when the outer world mirrors your inner world in a way that defies rational explanation. Here's a real example from Jung's own life. He was working with a patient who was extremely rational and closed off emotionally. She was describing a dream about a golden scarab beetle when, at that exact moment, Jung heard a tapping on his window. He opened it, and a scarab beetle, extremely rare in Switzerland, flew into the room. This impossible coincidence cracked open the patient's rational defenses and led to a breakthrough in her therapy. Jung believed these synchronicities are the universe's way of showing us we're connected to something far greater than ourselves. They're signs that you're aligned with your deeper purpose, or that you need to pay attention to something important. When you think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they suddenly call you, That's synchronicity. When you're struggling with a major decision and a stranger says exactly what you needed to hear, that's synchronicity. When you keep seeing the same number sequence, 111, 444, or your birth date, appearing on clocks, receipts, and license plates, that's the universe speaking in the language of symbols. Jung would say these aren't random events. They're proof that there's an underlying order to reality, what he called the unus mundus, the unified world where matter and psyche are one. When synchronicities increase in your life, it means you're moving closer to your authentic self and to God. The key is to remain open and attentive. Synchronicities often appear at crucial life transitions, before major changes, during spiritual awakenings, or when you're about to make an important decision. They're guideposts from the divine, confirming you're on the right path, or warning you to reconsider. Sign 3. An intense pull toward individuation. Jung spent much of his career exploring what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. This isn't about ego gratification or worldly success. It's about integrating all aspects of yourself. Light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, to become whole. When you feel an irresistible pull to know yourself more deeply, to question everything you've been taught, to strip away the false personas you've worn, this is the divine calling you toward individuation. It's God trying to birth your authentic self into the world. This call often feels uncomfortable, even painful. You might suddenly realize that the career you've built doesn't align with your true values. You might feel compelled to end relationships that once felt safe, but now feel suffocating. You might experience a crisis that forces you to confront parts of yourself you've always denied. Jung believed these dark nights of the soul are actually sacred initiations. The divine is dismantling your false self, so your true self can emerge. In his own life, Jung experienced a profound psychological crisis in his late 30s that lasted years. He had terrifying visions, heard voices, and felt he was going mad. But he bravely descended into this darkness, recording his experiences in what would become the Red Book. What Jung discovered is that this breakdown was actually a breakthrough. The images and symbols that emerged from his unconscious during this time became the foundation for his entire life's work. The divine had shattered his ego identity, so something far greater could be born through him. If you're experiencing an unexplainable restlessness, a sense that you're meant for something more, an urgency to discover your purpose, this is the divine calling you to individuate. Don't ignore it. Don't medicate it away or distract yourself from it. This is perhaps the most important message you'll ever receive. Sign 4. Encounters with your shadow. One of Jung's most revolutionary ideas is the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, and project onto others. The shadow contains not only our darker impulses, but also our hidden gifts, the parts of our potential we've buried because they didn't fit the image we wanted to present to the world. When you keep encountering the same types of people who irritate or trigger you intensely, Jung would say this is the divine holding up a mirror. These people are showing you your own shadow. What you hate in them exists somewhere in you. What you're judging is actually something you need to integrate. Perhaps you're constantly annoyed by arrogant people, but you've suppressed your own healthy confidence because you were taught it was wrong to stand out. Maybe you're disgusted by people you perceive as selfish, but you've denied your own legitimate needs for so long that you've become depleted and resentful. The divine speaks through these shadow encounters because spiritual growth is impossible without shadow integration. You cannot become whole while rejecting parts of yourself. God is trying to make you complete, and that means embracing your full humanity. Light and dark, strengths and weaknesses, nobility and pettiness. Jung also taught that the shadow contains gold, untapped potential, and undeveloped gifts. Many people suppress their creativity, their power, their sexuality, or their ambition because these energies were deemed unacceptable in their families or cultures. When you start feeling drawn to explore areas of life you previously avoided or judged, this might be the divine inviting you to reclaim your shadow gold. If you're suddenly feeling angry and you don't know why, if you're having disturbing fantasies or impulses, if you're attracted to people or activities that seem unlike you, don't panic. The shadow is rising into consciousness. God is trying to show you the parts of yourself that need love, acceptance, and integration. Sign 5. Numinous experiences that overwhelm the ego. Jung used the word numinous to describe experiences of the holy, the sacred, the divine that overwhelm our ordinary consciousness. These are moments when you feel the presence of something infinitely greater than yourself. Moments of awe, terror, wonder, and profound significance. You might experience this in nature, standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, watching the birth of your child, or witnessing a sunset that brings you to tears for reasons you can't explain. You might experience it in moments of crisis, when time seems to stop and clarity floods through you. You might experience it in meditation, prayer, or contemplation, when suddenly the boundary between you and everything else dissolves. These numinous experiences were central to Jung's understanding of the divine. He believed that God doesn't exist as an external being we can prove or disprove. Instead, the divine is a psychological reality, a direct experience of the sacred that transforms consciousness. When you have a numinous experience, your ego, your sense of being a separate, isolated individual, is temporarily overwhelmed by the presence of the self, what Jung called the God image within the psyche. In these moments, you're not reasoning about God or believing in God. You're experiencing God directly. Jung himself had a profound numinous vision after a heart attack. He left his body and saw the earth from space, then approached a temple made of stones floating in the cosmos. He was about to enter when his doctor called him back to life. Jung later said this experience gave him absolute certainty about the reality of the psyche beyond physical existence. If you've had experiences where you felt connected to everything, where time seemed to stop, where you knew something with absolute certainty beyond rational proof, these are not delusions or fantasies. According to Jung, these are the most real experiences possible. The divine is revealing itself directly to your consciousness. Many people dismiss these experiences, minimize them, or forget them because they don't fit our materialistic worldview. But Jung would urge you to honor them, to remember them, to let them guide your life. They're proof that you're not just a biological machine, but a spiritual being having a human experience. Sign 6. A call to explore spirituality beyond convention. Jung was deeply religious, but never in a conventional way. He studied Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Gnosticism, alchemy, and indigenous spiritualities. He believed that the divine expresses itself through many traditions, and that each person must find their unique relationship with the sacred. If you feel pulled to explore spirituality, but traditional religion doesn't resonate with you, Jung would say this is the divine calling you to a direct, personal encounter with the sacred. You're not being called to follow someone else's path, but to discover your own. Maybe you're drawn to meditation, energy work, or contemplative practices. Maybe you're fascinated by myths, symbols, and dreams. Maybe you feel a connection to nature that feels more spiritual than anything you've experienced in a church. Maybe you're exploring different wisdom traditions, looking for the universal truths they share. This spiritual seeking is not rebellion or confusion. It's the self trying to connect with something greater. Jung believed that in the modern world, many people need to forge their own spiritual path because the traditional containers no longer hold meaning for them. However, Jung also warned about spiritual inflation, the ego claiming spiritual experiences for itself and becoming grandiose. True spirituality humbles you and makes you more compassionate, not more special. If your spiritual seeking is making you judgmental of others or convinced of your superiority, that's the ego hijacking the process. The divine call to spiritual exploration often comes during midlife, what Jung called the second half of life. The first half is about building an ego, establishing yourself in the world, achieving goals. The second half is about transcending the ego and discovering your spiritual nature. If you're experiencing a spiritual hunger that worldly success cannot satisfy, if you're questioning beliefs you once held firmly, if you're drawn to explore the great mysteries of existence, this is God calling you toward a deeper truth. Sign 7. Creative urges and expressions from the unconscious. Jung viewed creativity as a sacred act, a way the divine speaks through us. When you feel compelled to create, to write, paint, dance, build, or express something from deep within, this is not just a hobby or talent. It's the self trying to manifest something new in the world. Many people suppress their creative impulses because they think they're not good enough, or creativity isn't practical, or they don't have time. But Jung would say that denying your creative nature is denying a fundamental part of how the divine works through you. The creative urge often comes with images, symbols, or visions that feel like they're coming from somewhere beyond your conscious mind. Jung experienced this when creating the Red Book. He felt the images and words flowing through him from the unconscious. He didn't fully understand what he was creating, but he trusted the process. When you have ideas that won't leave you alone, projects that keep calling to you, or visions of what you could create, these are messages from the self. The divine is trying to birth something new into reality through your unique gifts and perspective. Creativity is also how we process and integrate unconscious material. Art, music, writing, and other creative expressions allow the unconscious to speak in its own language of symbols and images. This is why creative work can feel healing and transformative. It's literally making the unconscious conscious, which Jung saw as the fundamental work of individuation. If you've been ignoring your creative impulses, if you've been telling yourself you'll create someday, or if you've been playing small with your gifts, consider that the divine might be trying to express something through you that the world needs. Your creativity is not self-indulgent. It's sacred work. Sign 8. Suffering that refuses to be explained away. This is perhaps the most difficult sign to recognize and accept. Jung believed that some suffering is meaningful. It's the soul's way of forcing growth, transformation, and depth. When you're experiencing pain that therapy can't fully resolve, that logic can't explain away, that time doesn't seem to heal, this might be sacred suffering, what Jung called the wounded healer archetype. Jung himself struggled with depression, anxiety, and psychological turmoil throughout his life. But he came to see this suffering as the price of depth, the cost of living consciously and authentically. His wounds became his wisdom. His darkness became his light. When you're going through a period of suffering that seems senseless, loss, illness, betrayal, failure, it's natural to ask, why is this happening to me? Jung would reframe the question, what is this suffering trying to teach me? What is trying to be born through this pain? The divine often speaks loudest in our darkest moments. When everything is stripped away, health, relationships, success, identity, we're finally forced to confront the deepest questions of existence. We're finally ready to hear truths we would have dismissed when we felt comfortable and in control. This doesn't mean that all suffering is good or that we should seek it out, but it does mean that suffering can be transformative if we approach it consciously. The descent into darkness can be a descent into depth, where we discover resources of strength, faith, and wisdom we never knew we possessed. If you're suffering in a way that feels meaningfully different from ordinary pain, if your struggle seems to be initiating you into a new level of understanding, if your wounds are somehow becoming your gifts. This is the divine working through your suffering to birth something new in you. Carl Jung dedicated his life to helping people understand that the psyche is not just a product of biology and conditioning. It's a profound mystery, a bridge between the human and the divine. The signs we've explored today, recurring dreams, synchronicities, the call to individuation, shadow encounters, numinous experiences, spiritual hunger, creative urges, and meaningful suffering, are all ways that something greater than our ego consciousness tries to guide us toward wholeness. The question is, are you listening? In our modern world, we're trained to dismiss these signs as coincidence, imagination, or wishful thinking. We're taught to trust only what we can measure and prove. But Jung would say we're impoverishing ourselves by rejecting the symbolic, the numinous, the sacred dimensions of existence. You don't have to call it God. You can call it the self, the unconscious, the universe, or simply the mystery. What matters is recognizing that you're part of something infinitely larger than your individual ego, and that this larger reality is constantly trying to communicate with you. Start paying attention to your dreams. Keep a journal by your bed and write them down immediately upon waking. Notice patterns, recurring symbols, and powerful emotions that linger after you wake. Your dreams are a nightly communication from the deepest parts of yourself. Watch for synchronicities. When meaningful coincidences occur, don't dismiss them. Ask yourself, what might this be pointing toward? What needs my attention right now? Let these moments of connection guide your decisions and deepen your sense of participating in a meaningful universe. Honor your inner work. The journey of individuation is not easy or comfortable, but it's the most important work you'll ever do. It's the work of becoming real, of integrating your full humanity, of aligning with your deepest truth. Face your shadow with courage. When you're triggered or judgmental, ask yourself what you're seeing in others that you've rejected in yourself. Reclaim the lost and denied parts of your psyche with compassion. Stay open to the numinous. Make space for mystery, wonder, and experiences that transcend rational understanding. These moments of connection with the sacred are not distractions from real life. They're the most real experiences possible. Follow your spiritual hunger wherever it leads. Don't let convention or fear keep you from the direct encounter with the sacred that your soul craves. Create fearlessly. Let the images, ideas, and visions from your unconscious flow into the world through whatever medium calls to you. And when suffering comes, as it inevitably will, look for its meaning. Ask what is trying to transform, what is trying to die, and what is trying to be born. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The signs we've discussed today are invitations to that privilege. They're the divine, however you understand it, calling you home to yourself. So I'll leave you with this question. What signs have you been ignoring? What messages have you been dismissing as coincidence? What is trying to emerge in your life right now that you haven't had the courage to acknowledge? The divine is always speaking. The question is whether we're brave enough to listen. Thank you for watching. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And most importantly, start paying attention to the signs in your own life. Your journey of awakening is uniquely yours, and it's waiting for you to begin. Until next time, trust the wisdom of your soul, honor the mystery, and keep listening.